Okay, do you want to round the troops up? Ladies and gentlemen, if you take your seats, please. We don't want to get behind schedule at the very start.
I'm used to people who go from the shoulder. As a cocktail person, it's drives me mad. We they're not interested in you, they're just interested in something more important. And I happen to be lunch. It's a syndrome.
Okay, John, you've got the floor. It's on record, so you can start whenever you want.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome, everybody, to the Australian Numismatic Society's biennial conference. We might be a year late, but hey, you know,
What's the first triangle?
we've all had to do the right thing, and you know, I feel that we're sort of fortunate enough to be able to come tonight for this weekend. I basically just need to do a bit of housekeeping with you guys as to exactly how things are going to progress this weekend. First of all, the talks, we're going to try and limit them to 30 minutes, but say 25 minutes of talk and maybe 5 minutes of question time. Right now, if you do need to feel that you're going to go over that 30 minutes, just let me know and I can try and rearrange a few things. So, so don't worry about sort of rushing through and speaking that quickly that no one can understand what you're saying. So that's first of all. We have morning teas, and that'll be in the back of the room. Yeah, we've got the tea and coffee down the back.
Yeah. And we have lunch in this room as well.
And lunch in this room. And in the afternoon we can also have afternoon tea here as well. So in effect we'll basically be in this room for the next
2 days.
So, get used to it. Now I think there's one other thing for anyone that hasn't been here before. The toilets are just out that door. You've got to just disappear out that way, and then you'll be right for that. I don't think there's anything else I need to say. The first thing that I'd like to say is I'd like to thank Rod Sell very, very much for making sure that everything is organised, basically everything. I did ask him if I could help in any way, but he said no, he's got it all under control, and he has. You know, he's done a very good job. You know, even to the point of keeping in touch with the venue. You know, I think he spent a lot of time talking to them, making sure that everything was going to be okay for us. To the printing of the timetable, printing of the certificates, printing of everything. You know, Rod did the whole lot. Well done, Rod. I don't think there's nothing else I need to say about the conference itself. It's going to, well, I'm certainly going to be able to talk to you guys at the end of the conference, and I'm sure that you know, the talks that we're going to have over the next 2 days are going to be truly fantastic, and I'll probably recap on that at the end on Sunday afternoon. So, but at the moment, I'm just as much in the dark as what people are going to be talking about this next 2 days, so I won't comment any more on that. Other than that, I will introduce our patron, John Pearn.
Minute silence first.
Sorry?
The minute silence for the embassy post.
Let me put my glasses on. This is why blood's so vague. He always tells me to put my glasses
Yes. We'd ask everyone to be upstanding.
Yes.
We have a minute's silence for the members who've passed away in the last 3 years now.
We are remembering Hugh Armstrong, who passed away on the 18th of November 2020. Mervyn Meads, 19th of August 2020. Lawrence Sherwin, 11th of June 2020. Bernard Holt, the 30th of August 2019. Mark Freehill, 4th of January 2019. And Max Bullis, 23rd of June 2018.
Getting myself caught.
Okay, maybe I'll check the front to see if I've done anything else. Take my glasses off.
Members to introduce themselves.
I don't think there's anything else that I need to say as far as housekeeping is concerned in the Australian Numismatic Society. So we'll just introduce you to our patron John Pearn, who's going to do the opening address. Thank you, John. Please.
Well, John Viltmeyer, our President, John and Rod Sell, our patrons of this conference, colleagues, all members and fellows of our society and guests. It's very special to be here today, of course. We've been looking forward to this now for the last 3 years, being here, and all of us are very much aware of the special things that bring us together, the wonderful scholarship, the incredible research, but perhaps most importantly of all, the wonderful fellowship, which is the tradition and the great hallmark of this society. Turmoil engulfed the world in March 2020 as the coronavirus, COVID-19, became established as the worldwide pandemic. Millions of lives were lost, livelihoods have been destroyed, social intercourse has been hugely compromised, and many personal lives have been changed, sometimes, in some cases, forever. Not since 1918, when the Spanish flu pandemic hit the world, has there been such a degree of social disruption in the modern world. The coronavirus is featured in many situations to us, so named, of course, because of the attachments. This is an electron micrograph of the 45 nanometer viral particle. The red features on the surface of the virion highlighted here, giving the name corona, which we now have come to know so well, which is part of our daily vernacular. Those otherwise forced to remain isolated at home have in fact over this last almost 18 months now enjoyed a hobby, and some have found much compensation in being able to spend more time with those things of our special interests. Those of us who delight in the world of numismatics have found time, often uninterrupted time, to indulge in the art and science of the world of coins, medals, medallions, banknotes and badges. And for many, there's never been such a time of personal numismatic collections being so well sorted, classified and presented. And for some, this time forced upon us over these last 18 months now, have enabled new research themes to have evolved. And perhaps papers have been thought about and in some cases produced, which would never otherwise have seen the light of day. Surprisingly, of course, very few numismatic pieces have been struck to highlight the enormous social disruption of this COVID epidemic. but of course we know from the past that there are other coins. This is a coin well known, I think, to everybody. This is a coin of Antonius Pius, the Roman emperor, 131 AD. Here, commissioning and striking a coin which commemorated 300 years earlier than him the Great Plague of Rome. And he's portraying here the Monia has portrayed in this magnificent coin, really, the prow of the ship coming up the river Tiber to the city of Rome. Here, the river Tiber, with the metaphor of Tiber himself, the river god, and aboard the ship was the Aesculapian serpent of healing, which was summoned to Rome to deal with the plague of that time. But by contrast with that and several other coins struck over the millennia to illustrate the problems of epidemics, coins struck in Hungary in the 16th century, 17th century as well, and coins in 1606 struck for the Great Fire of London, the Great Plague of London as well, in which one of the very fine and rare pieces is the Queen Elizabeth's first Phoenix coin, showing symbolically on that coin a viper, metaphor for endemic or pandemic disease, and a tree sprouting, symbolising new life coming at the end of a pandemic. So by contrast with this history in numismatics, there is there've been very few coins struck. I just wanted to illustrate this coin. This was struck by our colleagues from the Royal Numismatic Society of New Zealand for their 90th anniversary conference in New Zealand last October. On the obverse of the coin, you see the three main islands of New Zealand with a Maori motif here. The four stars used by New Zealand to symbolise the Southern Cross. They always emit epsilon, as you know, the fifth star which we include in the Australian portrayal of the Southern Cross. But on the reverse of the medal we see here a portrayal of Port Nicholson Harbour, on which Wellington stands, with the 90th anniversary date of the society, our colleagues in New Zealand, but they've put there three small viruses to symbolise the pandemic which engulfed the world and which caused that otherwise international conference to be a Zoom conference as well. And there were 80 of those medals struck. There were 41 medals specially struck for speakers. And this is the Speaker's Medal. It's, as you can see, distinguished from the others with enamel infill on the left, on the obverse, and on the right. And you can see the three virus particles down here more clearly picked out in gilt on the 41 Speaker's medal. So this was a medal 43 millimetres by 3 millimetres. It's a small medal, but a precious medal, and one of the very few medals now that we know which has so far been struck anywhere to commemorate the COVID-19 to 22, what will be to 22 pandemic. So that's a bit of a challenge to us all. By contrast, there have been a whole host of tinnies produced. Some of us who've had our first jab proudly wear this tinny, and many institutions have struck tinnies, and I'm sure in another 2 years' time when we're sitting here, hopefully those of us who are blessed will be in this room on that occasion. Somebody, I hope, will present a series of the tinnies of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the one produced by my own hospital in Brisbane to encourage the others who haven't yet received their jab. By contrast, now with us as numismatists, our colleagues in the world of philately haven't been so slack in recording the impact of this pandemic. And these are maxi cards produced by the Australian by Australia Post. As you can see on the left, showing the highlighting the service of those on the front line, and you can see the cancellation in the of the stamp here, again with the virion particles highlighted on the stamp. And very importantly indeed, those who have really been on the front line, our colleagues in the armed services, the ambulance services and hotel services, who of course have always been in some risk for contact, as we know, a realised risk in several situations over the last 12 months or so. So the philatelists have produced that. Wonderfully, in 2008, Australia Post, together with the Royal Australian Mint, produced this PNC of 100 years of quarantine. And we can see there the envelope that was struck and cancelled as the first day envelope on the right. The obverse of the coin struck by the Royal Australian Mint is there in the bottom right as well. And this is the coin. It's a very elegant coin, and I expect that most people here have one of these in their collection. Again, 2008, and the coin, the artist and medalist has symbolised on the coin a beagle dog in the quarantine and inspection service, as we all know, confronts everybody that comes into Australia by ship or by air. But the graphic artist wonderfully has symbolised travel and by implication, crossing international barriers and the need for quarantine there in the form of a stylised suitcase, but also in the form of a map of Australia.
Even got Tasmania there.
It has. Barry Scott, as you know, led a great campaign formally to insist that Tasmania was put on the map of Australia. Barry, we thank you very much for those of us who are Australians in the full and true sense of the word. We're not partial Australians, which happens so and so elsewhere. But that's the reverse of the quarantine coin for 2008. You can see on the suitcase map of Australia there, you can see that it's all the travel stickers that are symbolised there as well. So I think, just to conclude this patron's brief opening address, the numismatic issues throughout the world in the future, hopefully when they're struck, will memorialise something that's changed all our lives, and hopefully will lesser change our lives in the ensuing 1 to 2 years ahead. We know that so much in the memorialisation, and particularly the numismatic identity for the future of the major events which are happening today, can be changed by historians in the future as different viewpoints are put. But the important thing in a medal or a coin or a tinny is that something is there which is unchangeable, which tells of the attitudes and what is happening actually at the moment. So that's a challenge for us all, to do something about the pandemic in our creativity. And throughout the next 2 days we'll be greatly privileged to hear wonderful talks, as John has said, which join us all. But there are challenges that we also have a duty as numismatists ourselves to memorialise these very important national and international events. Thank you, John.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm chairing the first half of the day today, so I shall introduce the first speaker, which is John Pearn. Next I'm going to be talking about the numismatic literacy legacy of the Burke Wills exploring expedition, 1860 to 1861, that we've got up on this slide. So it's going to be an interesting one, that one, and I'm sure that John, in his will be able to sort of enlighten us a lot more on the expeditions of Burke Wills. Thank you, Bill.
Well, thank you very much indeed, John, as our chair of this session. This year is the 150th anniversary of the Burke Wills expedition. The Victorian exploring expedition of 1860-1861, known colloquially today and later formally after the expedition itself as the Burke Wills expedition, is enshrined as one of the great sagas of Australian history. There's a very extensive literature which records and analyses every facet of that tragic expedition. Such memorials preserve history in many forms. The Burke Wills expedition is memorialised in...
Sorry, I'll just get back to it.
It's memorialised in, of course, archives, in statuary, in philately, in street names, in the names of towns, and a whole range of very important forms of memorialisation. Many of you will know, have seen at the corner of Collins and Swanston Street in Melbourne, the Charles Summers statue of Burke Wills in this heroic pose. After the disaster of the expedition in 1861, there was a massive outpouring of sentiment in Australia and a wish to memorialise the lives of Burke Wills and to a lesser extent of Gray, who perished in Central Australia at Cooper Creek on that expedition. And there was a whip around and a huge amount of money was instantly poured in to craft these forms of memorialisation. This statue was sculpted and crafted and unveiled 4 years later in 1865. And many of us, as we're in Melbourne, see this statue. And as we'll see, it's copied on a number of numismatic pieces since that time. There are many other forms of memorialisation. This is from another statue, just seeing the expedition leaving Melbourne to traverse the continent. It was the first time, as you know, that the continent was traversed from south to north. And this is the scene of the expedition leaving Melbourne town on camels and horses with the huge baggage train. The next one, John, thank you. The expedition is memorialised in many paintings. This is a painting in the National Library of Victoria showing the expedition halfway through at a town. And the next one shows the John Longstaff painting of the burial of Burke at Central Creek, Cooper's Creek in Central Australia. This very Victorian scene of pathos when the rescue party, Howard, went back in 1861 and they found, with the help of survivor King, the body of Burke and of Wills. But there are many other memorials here. This is the plaque in Cloncurry, and numerous towns on the pathway from Melbourne in the south right up to Normanton in the Gulf of Carpentaria have local memorials of the expedition. Our philatelic colleagues have extensively memorialised the Burke Wills expedition. This is the 2010 stamp showing Burke on the left, the Wills on the right, in that memorialisation. And this is Ferdinand von Mueller, who was the president of the Royal Society of Victoria in 1861, and it was his great advocacy that led to the expedition itself. As we all know, philately is the most widespread form of memorialisation, whereas the numismatics is the most enduring. Trivial pursuit question: how many stamps have been bought, licked, affixed to envelopes commemorating the principles of the Burke Wills expedition? The answer in Australia, would you believe, is 100 million. In Germany, who published stamps as well, 37 million. In Ireland, John, who published the stamps for the Burke Wills expedition, 1 million Irish stamps were licked and affixed to envelopes. So it's a very enduring form of memorialisation. Here is Ferdinand von Mueller. He's Australia's most decorated scientist. The medals of Ferdinand von Mueller are enormously extensive. He has, it's known and documented more than 180 different decorations. He was born in Rostock, in Germany at the time. He was a pharmacist, got an honorary MD for his work on malarial plant botanical treatment of plant extracts for malaria. He came to South Australia, immigrated to South Australia, became an Australian citizen in 1849. He became engaged to the daughter of the GP in Mount Gambier. It's thought that he has the longest enduring engagement, 28 years, to a girl whom he then did not marry, never married in Australia, but he went to Melbourne where he was appointed, as we all know, as the government botanist, where he was the government botanist in Melbourne for 40 years. Now, he was a very formal German, of German extraction, and there are many portraits of him that exist festooned with his numismatic pieces, with his decorations. More than 60 or 70 affixed to his coat. But he was very proud of those, and rightly so. And that is what many people remember him as. But in fact, von Mueller was part of the North Australian exploring expedition that went up through Brisbane, it was 9 months on Victoria River at the junction of the modern Northern Territory in Western Australia. He came back on horseback and foot from there, 8,000 kilometres back to Brisbane, and then back to Melbourne. And one's research has shown that he travelled 45,000 kilometres on foot and horseback, far more than any other explorer has ever done in Australia.
He was never there to get married.
He became very prominent in Melbourne, of course. He named 2,000 new species new to Australian science, the world science, Australian botanical species, and on that one trip that he came back, he named 800 new species new to science. It's very important to say these were not new to our indigenous forebears, of course. He knew these plants intimately and their medicinal properties, but they were new to Western science. And von Mueller named one of these plants. He named about 15 of them after all his medical mates in Melbourne. So all the doctors in Melbourne have scientific names immortalised in Australian native plants because of von Mueller. He was a great person, and it was his advocacy that led to the Burke Wills expedition. Now, the expedition committee had 60 members. Only 2 of them had any exploring expedition experience themselves, and he was one. And in 1901, the Academy of Science in Australia struck as its most senior medal the von Mueller Medal for as the primacy award in Australia for science at that time. It was first issued in 1904, and it shows von Mueller here, not festooned with his medals, but simply holding in his hand a sprig of an Australian gum tree. It's Eucalyptus muelleriana, named after him, and that was the feature on the seat that you saw on the previous stamp. He was holding also a sprig of the von Mueller's mallee, which is this gum tree. So that's the reverse of the medal. It's no longer awarded. Some of you will have one of these in your collection. I have an unissued one, and the next slide shows the reverse of that medal. And on this slide is this beautiful portrayal of the Waratah, tilapia, which was first brought to Western notice, in fact, by the first Surgeon General, the first doctor in Australia, John White. He was part, as you know, of the senior surgeon of the first fleet. So that's a very important numismatic piece associated with the Burke Wills expedition. Well, who were these people? We've talked about von Mueller. What about Burke himself? The expedition left Melbourne, great fanfare, on the 21st of August 1860. The expedition had 130 tons of gear, 37 camels, horses, 3 tons of firewood. It was poorly planned, and it's not surprising, of course, that the firewood and 60 barrels of rum were jettisoned before they got to Menindee. It was quite ridiculous. There was a great fight with Burke and Landells, who was appointed to as the camel master. Landells wanted to give the rum to the camels to feed them, but Burke wanted it for humans, and it was a great fight, and Landells resigned on the spot. They got to Menindee. Burke was a very unfortunate personality, as everybody knows, and there was a fight there. One of the expedition doctor, Herman Beckler, resigned. A very unethical thing for a doctor to resign from an expedition, but he came on later, but he said he couldn't put up with it anymore, and the party went on and established the famous depot at Cooper Creek. At Cooper Creek, Burke decided that he and 3 others, his deputy leader, Wills, King and Gray, would try to reach the Gulf of Carpentaria. They asked the party here to remain and wait for 3 months for them to return with honours, and they gave a specific date for the party here, if they hadn't returned and were therefore presumed dead, to then return to Sydney. The 4 explorers got to the Gulf, as you know, passing through the lands of the Mitakudi and Kalkadoon people here. They were in the lands of the Yandrawanda people here and the Bikindji people here who helped them. And on the return trip here, Burke Wills became exhausted, partly starved. It's wondered whether they developed early scurvy because they had very conservative approaches to what they should be eating. And when they got back to here, Gray died, and the 3 surviving explorers, Burke, Wills and King, got into camp. They got into camp late afternoon to see the word dig on the coolabah tree beside Cooper Creek. The depot party waiting there had waited for 3 months. They waited an extra week, but pulled out on the very morning of the 3 dying explorers limped into the camp that afternoon. It's one of the most poignant, awful stories in Australian exploration history. But it's the romance from that gives the Burke Wills saga its very place in Australian history today. We celebrate defeats and failure, as in Anzac Cove and all that sort of thing, rather than great triumphs. So they got back to here. As you know, Gray died. Burke Wills ate their last camel. The Aboriginal people, the Yandrawanda people here, helped them, gave them fish and so on, and gave them nardoo, a little seed of a water plant. But nardoo contains a very dangerous enzyme which destroys vitamin B. And the indigenous people know that you brine it and cook it, which destroys that enzyme, and it's safe then to eat. But it has almost no nutritional properties. Burke Wills ate a lot of it, but they didn't prepare it properly. They didn't take notice or didn't interact with the Aboriginal people, and they died from beriberi. The surviving diary of Wills showed that they became paralysed and they perished within 3 weeks. Somehow, King survived there. And when the rescue party got back to, when the depot party got back to Melbourne and said they hadn't returned, the rescue parties went out. Howard's party, young Howard was 31 years of age, he led a party back to there. Landsborough came from Rockhampton here, another one from Brisbane, to try to find the missing explorers. And of course, when the Howard's party got in there, they found King still alive, nourished and cared for by the indigenous people. The bodies were brought back to Sydney. Well, there was an enormous emotional response to this. One of the biggest funeral that had ever been held in Melbourne town. Saw the bodies paraded through Melbourne and the subsequent burial. This coin was struck in Melbourne. It's dated 1861, but there's no surviving record of exactly when it was issued. The collector's card in the National Library of Victoria with one of these rare surviving medals says that it may have been issued for the opening of the statue that I showed you before, which was 4 years later. So John, if we could just see the next slide and see the reverse of that slide. Here they are, the two, and you'll see it's the same portrayal, grand portrayal of Burke here looking into the distance with his hand on the shoulder of young Wills. Well, who was Burke? Burke was a police sergeant. He was an Irishman. He was come out to Australia. He'd served in the Austrian army in the cavalry. He worked as a police sergeant in Castlemaine and Beechworth, and was then appointed in Sydney, in Melbourne. He was appointed against von Mueller's advice, actually, because of Burke's personality, to head the expedition. But the 60 people on the committee were factionalised, and Burke was chosen. Young Wills was a medical student. He was a medical student from Devon in Totnes, and he came out to Australia. He taught in Brisbane, at Brisbane Grammar School, as a science master for a period of time. He then was appointed as a scientist at the School of Mines in Adelaide, and then came to Melbourne, where he was appointed as a surveyor and amateur astronomer, as it were, and cartographer with the observatory in Melbourne. So he was chosen. He wasn't initially the second in command, but when Landells had the fight with Burke, Wills was then appointed as second in command. He was a young, gracious gentleman, a scholar, totally different from the dominant of Burke, but they got on apparently well together. Burke has been described as, and I quote, impulsive, quick-tempered, arbitrary, generous, tender-hearted and charming, recklessly brave, a daredevil with a thirst for distinction as yet unsatisfied. These are not the qualities you want for an expedition leader.
Sounds Irish.
Anyway, this is a very rare piece. I don't know if anybody has any one of these in their own personal collections. I think one or two of them have come up in notes on them. Sorry, Colin, you
I
have
had
one?
one years ago. But
Yes.
they're not that rare.
Yes. And they were struck in Melbourne by Stokes on the Andrews printing machine, metal striking machine, which had been brought out from England. Thanks, Sean. So the numismatic legacy of the Burke and Wills expedition also contains two very, very rare and extremely important pieces, brass breastplates. When the rescue party got back to Melbourne, the Hewitt party, rescue party, was given by the Exploring Expedition Committee, it's thought probably 3 breastplates to be given to the indigenous men who'd helped the expedition. And as you can see, they were not engraved, presented to by the Exploring Committee to be given to for help to the explorers. And one of the surviving fragments, archival fragments, said that one of these was to be given to Dick, always known as Mountain. He was a Mackenzie man from the Nindi region who'd been great help to the explorers, and 2 more were to be given by the Yandrawandra people at Cooper's Creek in Central Australia as well. Now this one was found by a metal detector, people working with metal detectors on the ground in northern South Australia, near Inamika, and it was put up for auction, but there was of course a great outcry about this, and the Minister of whatever ordered its removal from the catalogue. Ultimately it was valued a very high value. I think, if anybody knows, I think it was $200,000. Half was given to the finders, and the other, the numismatic piece, was then put into the South Australian Museum. There's one of in the National Museum in Canberra as well. But these are the first numismatic pieces that we think were awarded to Indigenous people, or proposed to be awarded to Indigenous people in Australia, and therefore they're very part of the history and heritage of the avocation in which we work and which we love so much. Now a number of other medals were struck. This was our colleagues, the Numismatic Association of Victoria, in 1960 they struck this very fine medal, again with the obverse here, showing of course the details of the expedition, with the gum leaf here, and on the reverse here, wonderfully we see the 4 names of those 4 expeditioners. Burke Wills have so many memorials in Australia. As you know, Burke Town in northern Australia, in Queensland, the Shire of Burke, Burke River, Burke Mountain. In Brisbane alone, there are 7 suburbs have 2 streets named after them, Burke Street and Will Street, and every town along that path has Burke and Will Streets named in. I was in Charleville recently, of course took some photographs of Burke Street and Will Street, contiguous streets there. So there are memorials everywhere, wonderfully portrayed on the reverse of this medal from our colleagues in Melbourne. The City of Melbourne struck medals to commemorate the expedition as well, also in 1960. They used the same die, the same reverse as the ones used by the Numismatic Society of Victoria, but on the obverse you can see there the crest of the city of Melbourne. Other medals were struck as well. This is that obverse, just in higher form there. Again, it shows sprigs of Australian native plants as a little hemicirclet on either side of the city crest of the city of Melbourne. They were presented in these beautiful presentation packs. There were several silver medals struck, some bronze. They were given to councillors, particularly the higher value ones, but they were also, several were given for essay competitions for school students, writing essays about the Burke Wills expedition and what it meant in the history and heritage of Australia. This was another medal struck again by the City of Melbourne. This is a very elegant and beautiful silver medal, and you can see portrayed on the reverse here again is the Charles Summers Monument from the corner of Swanston Street and Collins Street in Melbourne again. I don't have a copy of these medals in my own collection, but some of you may also have them. Now, in 1988, in the bicentenary of Australia, Coles Meyer struck 20 medals which they thought symbolised the 20 most important features in the history of Australia. And one of those medals was the Burke Wills medals. This is the obverse, the common, this is the specific reverse of that medal. Again, we can see there Burke on the left there, the young Wills on the right, Burke's year of birth and death here, both perishing there at Cooper Creek in 1861, and they show the camels of the expedition there. One of those camels' names is still known. Her name was Pearl, but she was eaten finally in a desperate attempt to keep the explorers alive. What about PNCs? We were just chatting last night about rare Australian coins. This is a PNC struck by the Royal Australian Mint in 2010, and it's a beautiful coin. There's some doubt about the exact number of these PNCs which were issued. There were 2 coins issued on the PNC. There's one record I've had that said that only 5,000 were issued. If so, that makes this 20-cent coin extremely valuable, but I don't know if that's correct. But we can see on it, the medalist has stylised the bare footprints of the indigenous people at Cooper Creek here. We see the footprints of the camels here as well. And we see Burke here on his camel and Wills here on his horse. The original coin was, when it was being designed, had 2 camels on it. But there's a wonderful encyclopedic authority on the Burke and Wills expedition. His name is David Phoenix. He's a professional historian in Cairns. He's the patron and president of the Burke and Wills Society. He heard about this, checked it, and said, no, in fact, Wills was on a horse, not a camel. So that was corrected before the coin was struck. The other coin in that PNC edition is this $1 coin. Again, we can see the footsteps. They're symbolising the time that the surviving explorers were at Cooper Creek before their death. And we see here the tree, the dig tree sign with the blaze dig on it. This is a eucalyptus coolabah. I happen to be the Queensland State Government, by Act of Parliament, has half an acre of land around the dig tree on Cooper Creek. I'm privileged to be a trustee of that reserve and that tree. At the moment, we've just spent 800,000 of relaxed Commonwealth and state government money to preserve the tree with boardwalks from floods and so on. So the tree is preserved, still alive out there. It's 250 years old. It's in good shape, and an arborist goes out and checks it every 2 years for whiteheads and other things. But here is King. It's the only physical memorial to King, and it's wonderful that it's on a coin. It's his own, and he was just as brave, of course, as those other explorers. Everybody talks about Burke and Wills, but King and Gray were just as brave. And it's wonderful that his enduring memorial is there for forever on this coin. The PNCs that were issued at that time contain these stamps showing the tableau of Burke and Wills, the leaving of Sydney, them dying in Central Australia, Pearl the camel dying, being utterly eaten, and then the Burke and Wills and King trying to go to, as it says there, Mount Hopeless, which was a station southwest of Indonesia, which they knew was there, a cattle station. But of course they didn't get there. They perished from very before they got very far. Does anybody else go out to Cooper Creek? It's a wonderful trip. You camp out there. It's when you get to Charleville and then to Quilpie, you're only halfway to the border, unfortunately. But it's a long way. But it's open up there. We've just had Wi-Fi put in the camping ground there as well. So 38,000 grey nomads visit the dig tree site of Cooper Creek every year, which is rather wonderful. So here they are, these Burke and Wills in our philatelic record, again, John. And this is another coin that was struck. It was a week later, again, by the Royal Australian Mint, another PNC, and again, the Perth Mint, together with Australia Post, issued this beautiful silver PNC, this $1 coin, coloured, as we can see there, in a quasi-holographic form there. And as you can see on the left, we see the metaphoric portrayal of Burke and Wills one of the camels they had, and a stylised symbolic record of the dig tree there. It's a very beautiful, beautiful coin, and those are that I assume that a lot of people have them. They were open for open sale. They're quite expensive, being silver, of course, but it's a very nice part of Australian history and heritage. Well, just to conclude, as we know, as we've seen in the last 2 years, many forms of memorialisation have been destroyed. Statues are being disfaced and pulled down. History is being rewritten everywhere. And many of these forms of history memorialisation will be changed and will have gone. History is reinterpreted and rewritten. But the one thing that does survive is the numismatic record. And it's so important when we realise that all that we do in our research and in our presentations and in our love of the hobby, the avocation that we have, we are in fact preserving history and heritage in an immutable form for the unknown future. Thank you all.
Is there any questions for John?
One, not a question, but just a reference. In our last ANS auction, lot number 19 was the Queensland Australian National Geographic.
Yes,
there,
that's
and we had a map of Burke Wills.
how wonderful. Yes, there are at least another. There'd be at least another 10 Burke Wills medals, which I don't have in my own collection, but which are known to collectors and lovers of the Burke Wills story. Yes, the Royal Geographic Society of Australia,
yeah,
which in fact was founded in Queensland for many years until last 5 or 8 years ago, retained its name, although it was in fact a Queensland society, but it's now been nationalised, and they in fact struck medals as well, as you've said, Rod, for the Burke Wills expedition. And you may know of other medals as well, particularly Colin, I'm sure.
Not really an area I really got excited about, in terms of collecting. I'm so interested in history. No, I don't know.
There is, in those of you who travel in England, in Devon, in Totnes, there is a massive street memorial to Wills, young Wills, who was a medical student. He did 3 years of medicine. He came out with his father. His father was a surgeon on the goldfields of Ballarat, and young Wills was an unlicensed surgeon with his father there for at least a year at the height of the great gold. That's why the family was in Australia. He came out to Australia before he left and came up to Brisbane as a science teacher and so on.
There's one question that I want to know. So we always refer to Burke Wills. Now, on some of the medals, we have their first names as well. But I sort of just twigged on it that some of the medals had, say, just one first name, whereas other medals had two. First name, middle name. So what is their official full names?
Well, Robert O'Hara Burke, of course, the Irishman, always known as Robert O'Hara Burke. William John Wills is always known as William John Wills here, because his father was William Wills. And after the disaster of the expedition and when the explorers perished, the grieving father, the surgeon William Wills, who had gone back to England at the time, came back to Australia, and he got his son's diaries on the dash to the Gulf between Cooper Creek and the Gulf of Carpentaria. Burke didn't keep any notes. Strange for an expedition leader, but that wasn't his personality. But Wills kept a diary, and the grieving father republished those whole diaries in the next 3 to 4 years after 1861, when the Hewitt expedition got back with the bodies of the perished explorers. And the father then promoted the courage and the drama of the expedition. And it's through the father's publication of Wills's diary particularly that we know all these details of what actually happened. But to answer your question, John, the reason why the names are often, given names are often put for William John Wills is to distinguish that from his father, William Wills, who was also very much involved in the saga afterwards, in the aftermath of the story. I made a pilgrimage to, when I was doing this research for this talk several years ago, to William John Wills, the boy, the explorer, to his high school in Totnes in Devon, and rang up the headmaster and made an appointment and went up and said, "Oh, Dr. Pearn, very lovely to have you here." He said, "We've got young Wills's desk here." and they've kept he'd carved his initials, WJW, in the desk, which they've kept in the school. You know, he probably got 10 of the best at the time for replacing his desk, but it's now a treasured artefact. And of course, in the main square in the village of Totnes is this great memorial to Wills across the world.
Any other questions? Well, John, thank you for a very informative talk. We have that's the speaker's medal from the conference.
That will be greatly treasured.
As well as the other one that we already petition.
Well done, John. That was great.
Thank you.
What we have up next is, sorry, what? Okay, our next speaker, Ross Pratley. He's going to talk about the discoverers of Australia with a twist. Ross is preparing.
I don't mean to show that side of it too.
Right. And while you're preparing, I'll just get your talk ready for you.
Had an interesting time coming up here, by the way. Stopped at a place called Pearn. When I get driving, I just keep driving usually. I used to be known for going down and visiting the people that bred our dogs at Mount Macedon. I'd leave at 9 o'clock at night, and I was allowed to arrive by no earlier than 7 o'clock in the morning, but I'd just drive straight through. And by the time I'd get to past Albury and that, I'd have to turn Bruce Springsteen up and have the windows down. Anyway, coming up yesterday, stopped at Coopin and started and refuelled the car. And I don't know whether you're familiar with people who have had prostate cancer, and the treatment, that whenever there's running water and that, you really want to go. And so anyway, I dashed in, paid the bill, and looked around, and this unisex toilet, and there was 5 people in the queue. And I'm going, God, you know, running on the spot. And anyway, the couple that were immediately in front of me were an Asian couple, and she could see that I really wanted to go, and she's going, "Oh, you go in front of us." You know, not saying that, just pointing. And so I started explaining it all to her to make good my chance to go in front of them. And got to the stage where the door opened and the husband went in, and I said to her, where are you from? I'd gone to length explaining what I wanted to do, and then I said, "Where are you going to?" No, don't speak English. And I'd gone through all this thing telling them, and anyway, she still let me in. So that was all good. Now look, just while you're in a happy mood and such, if you could just stand up, please, so get some exercise out of it. And if you could just clap, if you could clap. I really think that the Queenslanders would like to cheer Now, where are we going? Discoverers of Australia with a twist. I'm probably giving a bum steer at the title, so please note it is qualified with a twist. There may be a few. We'll start off trying to verify the awards presented. I started off trying to verify the awards presented for this watermark paper. I've got it on display over there, but it doesn't really display well, but as you can see, the photos, thanks to Mr. Clemson, come out pretty good. The watermark paper was by T.H. Saunders of London, who had entered it in the Sydney exhibition in 1879, where it was awarded a gold medal, and in the Melbourne exhibition of 1880, where it was awarded a silver medal. We're all mostly familiar with metal, coin and banknote manufacture, but I'm amazed at what creates watermarks. Just see the gold medal briefly, and we might come back to it, another one. So that was the gold medal that was awarded in Sydney for it. And as I say, the manufacture of watermarks to me is rather good. A dandy roll, not something from Macca's or Subway. The process happens in the manufacture of paper whilst the paper is wet. Watermarks are probably overlooked by most collectors as it is a hidden security feature. To me, the manufacturer is a masterstroke, looking at how the detail from the artwork must have been transferred to a perforated metal cylinder called a dandy roll. The watermark is created during paper manufacture, secures the document's authenticity, adds prestige and is difficult to replicate. The designs and text can usually only be detected by holding the paper against a strong light source. Naturally, these two discoverers that appear on the watermark, who feature, should be mentioned, namely William Dampier, an outstanding navigator with a colourful past, said to be the first Englishman to explore in the privately owned ship named Cygnet, the coastal region of northwest Australia, then known as New Holland, landing on the mainland 15th of January 1688 and naming it Shark Bay. Also claimed was that he was the first person to circumnavigate the world 3 times. And of course, Captain James Cook, who charted the east coast in 1770 aboard the HM bark Endeavour. This was to be a medal I dreamt of, and the artist was none other than Vladimir Gottwald, an immigrant from Czechoslovakia who in a short time became one of the finest graphic artists of the Royal Australian Mint. For example, you'd be familiar with the 1995 Waltzing Matilda doll, and then having his portrait of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II approved for the 2000 50-cent piece, which was quite a departure from tradition. I befriended Vlad on early visits to the Mint about monthly as the coin colony sold products at the Mint shop. And he was keen to assist me. From a rough sketch came up with this. Unfortunately, this remains on my bucket list. Now back to confirming the award medals, it took me on a most interesting journey tracing records and turning up some remarkable information. Would you believe this magnificent building called the Garden Palace was constructed in 6 to 8 months? At the peak of the construction phase, near 3,000 men were employed, either directly or indirectly on the project, including 650 carpenters on site. For the first time, electricity was used in Australia to illuminate a building site so that work could be carried out at night. The first tram line in Sydney, so that it was constructed from Redfern to the Domain, so that the country's suburban visitors arriving by train could be transported directly to the exhibition site. The Sydney exhibition was the first true international exhibition that an Australian colony had hosted. The exhibition attracted over 1 million visitors at a time when the population of New South Wales was about $700,000. Awards for exhibitors were announced by the judges on the closing day of the 20th of April 1880. Is it possible to go back to that first one?
Back to the first one.
No, back further, please. More. Right, that'll do, please. Awards for the exhibitors were announced by the judges on the closing day, 20th of April 1880. Medals comprised of gold, silver and bronze, large and small medals of each medal. 76 millimetres the large and 51 millimetres the small ones were awarded. The medals of verse was based on a design by Samuel Begg and subsequently altered by J.S.A.B. Wine. Who prepared the dies. The wreath of the Australian flowers on the reverse was designed by James W. Sayers. The gold and silver medals were struck at the Sydney branch of the Royal Mint, and the bronze medals were struck in London. About 7,554 awards, including diplomas, were made. The exhibition was so popular that the government purchased many of the prize exhibits and set up the Technological, Industrial and Sanitary Museum, the grandparent of the Powerhouse Museum, where the ANS held meetings for a period. Now, can we get up to P7?
Sorry?
Oh, no, P6. Keep going, please. Forward. Three. Another one. So that's a silver medal. We're back. So that shows you the plans for the Garden Palace and the ruins to the right. And it's a silver medal, and it's the type of box that it was presented in. Next one. The Melbourne International Exhibition ran from 1 October 1880 to 30th of April 1881. The exhibition building that still stands was constructed for the occasion. Over 1.3 million people visited the exhibition at a time when Melbourne's population was around 282,000. It took 2 years to construct and still stands today. Vaccine hub, I believe, at present. Next one. The interior of the exhibition building. Quite a magnificent building. I remember a coin fair being held there at one stage. Next one. So this is underneath the dome and more. We've got the silver medal and then the bronze medal. More. P10, another one. Next. So there we go. You could visit the exhibition for a shilling. That was the ticket to go of entry, and that'd be a typical item Mark Freehill would have loved to have had. I'm sure he probably did have them. Next one. Oh, that's showing. Yeah, good. That's the gold medal for Melbourne. And of course, that's one room of where the displays were, and they attracted them from right around the world. It was an extraordinary exhibition, it truly was. Same with the Sydney one. And of course, there was a competition between Sydney and Melbourne, but I do prefer this one. I would move along. That's good. You racing this or something? One of the major exhibitors was the Melbourne Mint, and this is going to be one of the twists, I guess. So the Melbourne Mint took part in the exhibition, and at the time the Deputy Master of the Mint was a Vernon Dells Broughton. He produced this catalogue of exhibits, which is truly amazing. progress along it, and I'll exhibit just a few parts of it. But it's a 42-page document that I'd welcome the ANS to produce for members. The detail that he goes into, naming the staff, their tasks, and then the overseas side of things. There's even ancients galore in it. But that'll be up to the committee to see what they think. Now, the interior, next please. Forward. That's the interior of the minced coining room, and the visitors were you're allowed to make application to visit, but you had to be virtually well known to either staff or recommended by JP or whoever, and you had to report to the policeman out front first, and there were certain hours that you could come in. This document even goes into people depositing gold, and they could actually watch it being turned into bars or coins. But anyway. Okay, moving right along. Now for a further twist, oh, here we go. I'm doing well. I discovered and prepared the document prepared by the Master of the Mint, Vernon Dells Broughton. So more of him later, but this document is a catalogue of the exhibits by the Mint with explanations, truly extraordinary detail. The ANS should reproduce it for members. Now, go right. Table 1. It shows the miniatures of sovereigns and half-sovereigns, which clearly emphasises, I see, only 2 years of half-sovereigns, clearly emphasises the bullion coin, the sovereign, and the half-sovereign was produced purely for the populace. Overall, Sydney, Melbourne and Perth mintages, the ratio, when I calculated them, total mintages, the ratio for half-sovereigns was 40 to 1. In this instance, in the Melbourne Mint, in this brief period, 1872 to 1880, the ratio is closer to 60. So, next one.
Next one.
Oh, you've gone there, have you? Right,
No.
notice where they got the gold from too. The different colonies, and even Natal down the bottom. Now for some more outstanding exhibits. Is there any questions on this bit so far? No. We're moving right along then. What was intriguing was the fineness. You probably recall the difference between the Sydney Mint sovereigns, being that yellowy colour, compared to the sovereigns from England. And at first, of course, they were discounted because instead of £1, you got something like 18.6 down in Melbourne for them. But then they had them properly assayed and realised they were alloyed with silver. So they went to a premium of 22 and 6 These two are illustrating that the fineness, average weight and fineness, yeah. So we've got 1879 and 1873. If you go to the corresponding ones here, the fineness, there's a slight difference. Furthermore, in the document is about the bags they had to hold that they prepared to hold the sovereigns. It was special material. It had to be consistent down to the 99th gram in weight, so it didn't disturb it, and they'd hold 1,000 sovereigns. Now, next one. Oh, here we go. So I managed to get some of these illustrations from the Victorian Museum, because in here it lists the coins, medals, war decorations and electrotypes, something like 200 or 300 of them. And of course they're in the collection of the Victorian Museum. So they did send me some, and some I've cheated with. So of course you've got the lovely crown of George III, 1819, and the magnificent Gothic crown, 1847, by W. Woo-Woo, go back, by Wyon, and that'd arguably be Britain's most beautiful coin ever produced. Next, they sent me up a copy of the China medal, and you can see the patina that's present on the medal. The China medal was issued by the British government in 1843 to members of the British and Indian forces who took part in the First Anglo-Chinese War. The medal was designed again by William Wyon. An East India Company gold one mohair of 1835, King William IV. And these were all put on part of the Mint's display at the exhibition. Next. So then we go to electrotypes. I can't really get excited about electrotypes, but this one really grabbed me as far as the design was concerned. I don't think I've seen a medal that matches this one, and especially when I show you the next one. And this is out of the Royal Mint's collection with the dies, and that's rather grand. So then we'll finish that up, and we'll have an interlude, and I'll introduce my actors. It might bring a bit of frivolity about the nature thing and add to the twist. I don't know whether we can get some to join us. Robert Tonga was away, but he lent me his wig. We've got to get Tom in the park.
I've already got one on.
And stand up and stretch your legs if necessary. You don't have to clap anymore. Give you a gown. There you go. Right, that'll do. You're done. And we'll continue this twist.
I didn't do it for that. Looks good. My sacrifice. We're innocent.
Right, next one, please. So these are the parties involved. And unfortunately, this is what happened to Mr. Broughton. Right, one I'm saying wrote this marvellous exhibition catalogue, and a couple of years later, unfortunately, he came down with something. And get started off, please.
The scene is set to explore the lunacy of Mr. Vernon Delves Broughton. An examination was held at the Supreme Court yesterday before Mr. Justice Holroyd as to the lunacy of Mr. V. Delves Broughton, the Deputy Master of the Royal Mint, Western Melbourne Mint. Mr. Broughton was detained by Mr. Harcourt's asylum for the insane at Cremorne under a certificate by two medical practitioners that he is of unsound mind. The inquiry as to the state of the mind held yesterday was under section 73 of the lunacy statute, which provides that if a judge of any of the Supreme Court receive any information upon oath or otherwise, or have any reason or come to suspect that any person of sound mind is confined or detained as a lunatic in a jail, asylum or a hospital, such judge shall cause the keeper of such to bring such confined person before him in open court for examination. If the judge is satisfied that the person who is confined is of sound mind, he may order his discharge from custody. Mr. Broughton was brought before the court by Mr. Harcourt by an order of the Mr. Justice Holroyd a few days ago, based on the affidavits made by several persons who had conversed with Mr. Broughton at the asylum, who said they believed him to be sane. Mr. Forlong appears for Mr. Broughton, Mr. Box for the Crown Law Department, and Mr. Wilkes, solicitor, watches the case on behalf of Mr. Broughton. Thank you.
Now, the following evidence was given. I'm just introducing Mr. Crook here.
I have had experience in the examination of lunatics. On Saturday last, I saw Mr. Broughton at the Cremorne Asylum, and I also saw him again on Monday last. From the conversation I had with him, I came to the conclusion that he was sane. I could detect no traces of insanity. He had no delusions. He told me he slept about 6 hours each night. Sleeplessness is a test of insanity. Oh God, I must be He gave an account of how he was taken to the asylum. He seemed exasperated by it. He said something about having made an attempt to escape. I believe that if he was detained in the asylum, his health would suffer.
Mr. Box then cross-examined, and once again Mr. Crook came back, replied.
I spoke to him in reference to a delusion about purchasing horses for shipment to England. He spoke quite rationally on the above subject. He said he would claim damages for his detention, but he made no threats against anyone in my presence. I'm not connected with any lunatic asylum in this colony. I was examining officer at the New Norfolk almost 25 years ago, but I have since had experience among older lunatic patients. I spoke to Mr. Broughton about his interest in Silverton mines. He talked quite rationally on the subject.
So now we'll just introduce the medical practitioner, Samuel Peacock. Highly qualified.
I examined Mr. Broughton on Saturday last. I spoke to him about speculations in horses. He was quite rational. I consider him quite sane. He said nothing about 10,000 or 16,000 horses.
And then George Bent was brought into it, and he's the mechanical engineer at the Mint, and he said, I've known Mr. Broughton for several years. I've not noticed any signs of insanity about him. If he had been mad, I would have noticed it, as I was almost in daily communication with him. He was fond of hunting. Cross-examined by RS. Who did I have as RS? Oh, Rod Sell, that's right. But anyway, he's ducked out of it. I did not know that he had had a fit on the day he was taken to the asylum. Now, in reply to Mr. Furlong is Mr. Broughton. And who can be Mr. Broughton? Where is stage left, stage right? Oh, there it is. I realise he wasn't like this when he went to the woods at the Mint. I am Deputy Master of the Melbourne Mint. I'm an Imperial officer. My salary is £1,400 a year and I have a house. The rent is 1/6 of my salary. One evening a friend of mine spoke to me at the club about taking some good horses from this colony to England. I rather poo-pooed the idea at first, but I said I would think about it. I made inquiries as to purchasing horses and would make 500% profit by sending horses home in large numbers. I then advertised in the Argus and the Australasian for horses. 2 or 3 days afterwards, I was not very well, and I went to see Dr. Balls Headley. We discussed the question of purchasing the horses, and he said I was a fool to think of such a thing. A day or two after, I was in my office in the Mint, writing letters, when Dr. Balls Headley came in without knocking and asked me how I was. I told him I could not attend to him, and as I was busy, and he went away. I'm told that Dr. Fisher afterwards saw me, but I don't remember that circumstance. In the evening, a servant girl who had been with me since I left England called on me and asked about dinner. I said I would dine out. After that, Dr. Balls Headley and a man named Eaton came to me and said there were some horses for sale at Richmond. Eaton asked me to go and see them at once, as they would not be available the next day. He had a cab at the door, and they enticed me into it. We drove off, and I was taken to Mr. Harcourt's. I was taken into a room where Mr. Harcourt was. He asked me to come into the yard and look at the horses. I went with him and passed through a gate, and I suddenly found myself among a lot of mad fellows. I thought I was amongst a lot of thieves. One of them had a large jug of water, and he was giving the others a drink from it. I thought that'd be a good weapon, but after time I saw a smaller jug. I seized that and retreated into a corner to defend myself. They said if I would give up the jug, they would release me the next day. I gave it up, but they kept putting me off day by day. One day at dinner, I seized the carving knife and retreated into my corner. They all rushed at me. Another day I was walking with Eaton when we met a big man named Morton. Eaton said that Morton was to be my attendant. He's mad. He's already killed 2 men. I was placed in his charge. One day I was walking with him. I had a small stick in my hand and I made a jab at him. He put me in a cell with a lot of others. Harcourt looked in and jeered at me. They put me in a straitjacket and handcuffed me for nearly a fortnight. There was little accommodation in the room and the floor was filthy. My treatment was perfectly disgraceful. On another day, Eaton struck me on the hand with an iron bar. There was a general scrimmage. He gave me a black eye. Eaton went away to get assistance. I pulled away part of the mattress and saw a hole from which I could escape. However, I stripped myself and waited for them. I still feel the effects of the blow I then got, even though it happened 10 weeks ago. I made no complaints to Harcourt, as I could not see him, and he was the last person I would apply to. I have written hundreds of letters, but none of them have been delivered. I wrote 51 in the first fortnight. I was never so well in all my life as the day I was taken into that asylum, and I'm not so well now, as I've been worried and harassed. Cross-examined by Mr. Box. Back to Mr. Broughton. I was fast asleep with things on me. I heard a noise and woke up and found the things lying on the floor. I thought the door might open, and I got up but found it fastened. I can give no explanation as to how the things came off me. It puzzled me. I tried before I fell asleep to take them off. The handcuffs were leather pads fastened around my wrist and secured with a lock. There was also a strap to the waist. All these were off when I woke up. I heard no noises that night. I saw nothing supernatural during the night, no more than I do now. It was pitch dark when I woke. The noise I heard was the handcuffs falling on the floor. A similar thing once happened to me at the Mint. I was dozing after my work and a curious streak of light shone about me. Something intimated to me that God Almighty had been watching me, that I should be a better man than I was before, but that I should have some suffering. There was no indication of the nature of the suffering. This was not a dream. It made a great impression on me.
And Mr. Box, how many horses do you propose to buy?
Mr. Broughton, I would buy any number I could afford, perhaps a couple of hundred. I'd buy thousands if I had the money. I know a great many masters of hounds in England, and I thought if the horses were taken to England at the beginning of the hunting season, I would lend them to my hunting friends to ride them and show them off. I would sell them in large batches at Tattersalls at the end of the season. Horses sell better in large batches than singly or in small lots. I reckon that the average cost of each horse would be from 60 to 70 pounds, and that they would fetch 300 pounds each. I have paid that myself for a good horse. I had a few letters in reply to my advertisements. The price asked were ridiculously low. The horses offered were a good pedigree and weight. Weight carriers, winners of big events since 1859, 8 derbies, 8 oaks, 2 or 3 champions, several ledgers and a Maribyrnong plates. If I went largely into it, I would do uncommonly well. I did propose to charter a ship. I don't know how many ships I should charter. It would all depend on the number of horses I could get. I'm not going to tell you all my scheme, but we'll have a quiet chat with you about it if you like. How much capital did you intend to invest? It all depended on the number of horses I could get. I have not bought horses because I have been in prison. Many horses have been offered to me. I wrote to the Duke of Beaufort and I got a nice letter from him yesterday. I wrote to Lord Spencer and one of 2 Masters of Hounds. I wrote to the Master of Pitchley, to the Duke of Grafton and to Lord Valentia. I told them I would send the horses home as I got them, and they were to ride them as hard as they could, properly and fairly. I also wrote to the Prince of Wales and would let him have some horses. I'll read it for you, Col. Did you not perform some extraordinary feat of walking? I'll tell you what I was told. I wanted to exercise and I wanted to see how fast I could walk. A young man and myself measured out a space of about 175 yards in length, but it since has turned out to be considerably less. The man kept time and measured the distance, and he said I walked 33 miles in 2 hours. That seems impossible, but I know I did an immense pace, fair toe and heel. I've since been told the distance was only 26 miles. I had no watch myself, and I only speak of what I was told. I was naturally surprised at doing the enormous distance. Taking all this in, eh?
Did you propose to buy Cremorne?
I heard that Mr. Harcourt was going to sell Cremorne. I told him if it was true that he was going to sell, I would purchase it and make it a beautiful place. I had no plan about it.
What is it worth?
I have no idea of the value of the land, but of course I would take the opinion of agents. I asked Mr. Harcourt what he would take for it. He told me, but I'm not going to divulge it without his consent. It would not be fair to him or to me. I told him to go to Mr. Wilkes's firm and we could arrange terms. I'm fond of gardening. I dare say I put in 10,000 slips of Cremorne. A good many are dead. If I had a garden, I would get a big scoop and 16 bullocks and make proper walks. I would order a single and double plough, and I thought if Mr. Harcourt and I came to terms, I could go to work at once and not lose a season.
Did you propose to rebuild in marble?
I thought it would be very nice to put a marble front to it. I'm a small shareholder in a marble company. That marble beats anything you ever saw. It is from a place near Romeo, and only a small tramway is required to work it. The marble is as white as this ceiling, but there is also blue, red and yellow marble. Chambers and Cluton said it was the very best marble they'd ever seen. There is enough marble there to rebuild Melbourne. I had no distinct scheme. Now, as to some property in New Zealand I was thinking of buying, It was a block of 4,000 acres with 16,000 sheep on it, £4 an acre. I don't know whether it would have been a success. A friend of mine bought some shares for me in a mine at Silverton. I knew nothing about it till he told me.
Where were you to get the money to buy the New Zealand property?
That is my business. I've called myself the Silver Emperor, but it was only a piece of chat. Can't a man have a joke? I would not like to tackle a man in a fight now, as I have broken one hand. One New Year's Eve I did knock down a man at Abe Hickens, but he annoyed me. There's a gentleman in court who was one of the party who went to Hickens, and he saw me knock the man through the door. I used to keep a pack of hounds near Morty Alley. His Honour's clerk there has been out hunting with me many a time. We hunted the kangaroos away from the district. I feel perfectly fit and well to go to work. I don't know how far I walked on that occasion at Cremorne. Here we go.
I examined Mr. Broughton last Saturday. He was excitable. He had already been subjected to a long medical examination. He did not know me at first, but when I was introduced to him, he recognised me as having been examined here some years ago for an insurance company. I consider he is weak in his intellect, but not manic. He would be better out of the asylum, but he should have an attendant with him. His perceptions are most keen. Restraint in his present condition would tend to make him mad.
Let's see how Judy.
In my opinion, Mr. Broughton is sane.
I thought Mr. Broughton was of unsound mind, and it would be dangerous to others to release him. He had been very violent. He'd employed himself in destroying a large garden, pulling up geraniums, breaking them into little sticks and planting them. He also pretended to be of unbounded wealth, talked of purchasing thousands of horses and giving people £10,000 or £20,000. The man Morton was not lunatic. He came to the asylum with good recommendations, but he turned out not to be smart enough. The so-called handcuffs were gloves placed on a patient to prevent him from injuring himself or others.
Yeah, that was Mr. Harcourt's examination of him. At this stage, the court was adjourned and on resuming, Mr. Furlong said,
I withdraw the application.
the proceedings were terminated and Mr. Broughton was taken back to the asylum. The end. Hooray!
So Ross,
I
tell
won't
us
get
the conclusion of Mr. Broughton. What happened after that?
Well, he died a couple of years later, within
At
18
the
months or
asylum. So he never got out of the asylum.
No. Anyway, there you go, folks.
Thank you.
Just got to do something a little different at times. Have been known for it.
You can always rely on Ross to have a twist about things. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. No,
Good
there's
man.
a
Much appreciated.
speaker's medal.
Okay, thank you.
My medical diagnosis, this is manic depressive psychosis. It's very typical to me of that. That is somebody with multiple grand ideas, but completely normal intellect, but just overwhelmed by plans and schemes. Some of them all with a quasi-normal theme in themselves. When you put them all together, they're very typical of that syndrome. It's a very tragic condition, and it causes, when it happens in a spouse, it causes almost always family breakups. People can't just cope with the manic energy of such a person. And Balls Headley was an interesting doctor in Melbourne. He was, unfortunately with that name, he was an obstetrician as well. And he rechanged his name just back to Dr. Headley after a while. But he was a recognised doctor at the time. But the story that you've told to me is that of manic depressive psychosis.
We had a gentleman like this come from England to a, no, it might have been a Spink sale, it was a long time ago, a naval sale. Do you recall, Cole?
I very much recall.
He bought so much at the auction, it was unbelievable. And unfortunately, that was the problem. And the sales didn't go through. Poor vendors.
I remember Mark Freer was handling a large lot of duplicates I had on his stage table. He said, "I've sold them all." I said, "What?" They're all different. He said, "I've sold a lot, whole lot." Because I got it back again. But most coin collectors got this diagnosis, had to be doctors. Well, all what they require, things that they never can afford to buy.
It puts a strain on the spouse.
That's right.
All right.
Time for
I think everybody has to have a dream about owning stuff that they can afford. So,
Well, I'd like that Pursuit medal, that's a beauty.
What happens if you get dream about it in your normal life? When you're playing ball, don't tell anyone.
Any word on that?
It's very sad.
thank you, everybody. It was nice to have a cup of tea and have a bit of a chat to people, so that was it's good. And it's good to see everybody else was doing the same thing. We're moving on to the next speaker. Everybody knows George Snelgrove, somebody from Queensland. One of the things that we've got here on the list that Rod wanted me to do is to introduce the members and get them to talk about their collecting interests first. But I don't
worry.
think that's the
I
case,
think
because if
we probably all know it anyway.
if we did that, we'd be here with George, because George has been around so long, and he'll tell you all about everything. So, anyway, George is going to be talking about the creation of a medallion today.
Sorry?
The creation of a medallion. Thanks, George.
Be prepared to get the wool over the eyes. Well, just take a minute of my time. When John was telling us the name of that fellow with the affliction, with the crying or whatever, and I thought that's a bit of me, because I was telling Cole that I was at a KG Grey, I think, was it? Grey sale, many years ago. What do you reckon it was? 67?
72.
72, yeah. And anyway, I was down there in all my element and all that sort of thing, and up come the bidding, and I was outbidding a fella from England and everything to get a coin and this, that and the other. And when I finished, I thought to myself, how am I going to pay for this? I might have had $400 or $500 on me, but it was more like $2,000. And because those days there was no credit card or anything like that. And so I sauntered up with Cole and told him the story, and he gave me a cheque for $2,000. And he saved the day. I'm glad to say we've been pretty good friends ever since. So what was that? You'll have to write that down, because I think I was one of those. Okay, the creation of a medallion. And this medallion, I've shown it at the club before, but I've never went into the full detail of it, because the creation of these medallions, there's a lot more to it than you get the medallion and say, oh yeah, it looks okay, and this, that and the other. But to be actually involved in producing, Rod Self got to tell you a bit about it. And I'll just read this and I think you'll get the gift of it. This is my display over here, number 10 of it. The idea of a medallion of a medal to commemorate the 200 years since the production of Australia's first coins, the Holy Dollar and Dump, and the 100 years of existence of the Australian Numismatic Society, so it's a dual commemorative, had been foremost in the mind of the branch committee for 2 years. This is back in those days. The suggestion of a medal for such an event was tabled at a branch committee meeting 12 months before the 2013 date. George Snelgrove was asked to prepare a suitable design. The designs submitted to the committee were readily accepted. Cost of the production figures were called for. The branch was fortunate to receive assistance and good advice from Vic and Annette Power of VP Coins, who have had extensive dealings with the production of various medallettes and medals. Many drawings and artwork went into the project before a suitable design was forwarded to a Chinese firm. And of course, I've got this thing in my mind how big it was, and I thought we'd never afford to get it done in Australia. Bondjet International Limited. All contact went through a sales representative in Hong Kong, who was most professional and helpful, with all efforts taken to deliver the required results. Many sketches from the designer and many computerised images from Hong Kong results. Hong Kong passed back and forth before all details were finalised. With designs and costs of manufacture presented to the committee, the go-ahead was given and the branch to cover all costs and to decide on a retail price for the medal. The branch received 3 samples of the medal, plus a double-sided insert card inserted. The two events that were encased in a fitted box. After 2 minor alterations, the sample boxes were made from white material instead of the requested black. I'll show you photos of them later. The final order was placed, and within a month a very satisfying consignment turned up with medals that the branch is quite proud of and very pleased to be able to offer such a worthy commemorative medal on behalf of the Australian Numismatic Society. Final addition to the box medal was an insert to the box from the medal design, where details is given about the designing of the medal, and each insert had been personally signed. So I had to sit down and sign 251 times or something. And one person at one show we're at wanted to buy one of these medals with the signature, and she said, "Do you think you could sign it originally instead of a copy?" I said, "It's already signed." Oh, so she was happy. So I'll sign it again if you like. The above brief description gives an impression that there was little input to such a venture, but this was far from what was required to get the project spot on to the high standard requested. The first consideration by George Snelgrove, the designer, was what the final design would be. Certainly an image of a holy dollar would be of high priority, and the Society's crest would be of importance. With many hours of consideration, the designer finally decided to use the obverse and reverse of a holy dollar, Carlos III, 1788, number 3 on page 20. Brought this along, I've had to show. You all familiar with this particular book? There it is over here. So if you've got one at home, you can. That's the one that I took the design.
When I give my talk, can I give a couple of medals?
Carlos, the Holy Dollars of New South Wales by W.J. Myra and W.J. Noble. The size of the medal was of significance, and to feature a holy dollar and dump on both sides commanded good detail and clarity. All known holy dollars are not the same diameter, so a suitable size was selected at 40 millimetres for the dollar and 18 millimetres for the dump. So, with much juggling of the design, a decision was made to make the medal 50 millimetres, therefore allowing the dollar and dump to be near full size and still fit within the rim of the 50 millimetres. The final result was pleasing as it is a good sized medal with good detail of what the dual commemorative was about. Sketches and details were sent to Von Jet International Limited. The phone call to their office in Hong Kong was very useful as their representative, a very nice lady who spoke good English and was most obliging. And at this point I'd like to pay tribute to my good friend Bernie Begley. And Bernie Begley, John Cook and myself, if there was any project on offer in our club, we were involved up to our necks in it. And we called ourselves secretly the Three Musketeers. And Bern had said to me, he said, now listen, when you're dealing with a foreign country like this, he says, you can't be over-explaining things. He said, you've got to keep it short and sweet. He said, so any phone calls or writings and jottings down to give them direction, he says, I'll do that. And I'm very glad he did, because he knew banking and everything, and I didn't have a clue. So I've got to give one of the Musketeers good credit. The Society crest was to be included in the design, and it was decided to place it in the centre of the Holy Dollars reverse, being the appropriate place as it was on the side of the medal that's celebrating 100 years of the Australian Numismatic Society. A scan of the crest was included with the first lot of sketches. The sketches, etc., were emailed off with high expectations, and we were not disappointed. A very pleasing computerised image was emailed and gave us confidence that we were quite professional in what they were doing. The depiction of the Holy Dollar was very good, considering that they were following a sketch, and the image was most pleasing. The images of the dump could have been followed more closely, but we decided not to fuss too much, as it was beginning to look like a fine production could result. The Society crest was of some concern because of its small size, but it too turned out to be quite good. That's the sketch I sent over, and I thought that they followed that quite nicely. Working off the original computerised image, it was pointed out that, one, the images of the dollar were not the same diameter. The top of the gap at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock needed to be consistent. There needed to be a gap around the crest so that it would not look like as though it was part of the original Holy Dollar. And the gap at the rim of the dumps needed to be uniform. The legends of both sides of the medal needed to be of the same size. All levels of the point were pointed out for the entire design. So I'll just give you that one to... Yeah, so you can sort of see the $2 weren't the same diameter. There wasn't much in it, but it wasn't the same. And there was other variations. this around here wasn't the same, same font as that. Lost in my point. Oh, yeah. And where the society crest was going in, I wanted that there'd be a space around it there, so as it didn't look like it was part of the dollar. The only other place I could fit the crest in was a small version over here, but it was so tiny I thought it would have got lost. And that's how the crest got on there like that. The other thing that impressed me with them, when this is the original one they sent me out, and they had 3D lines going out of what would be the lowest and the highest part of the dollar. And I was able to point out to them various things like, with the dump, I didn't want this background to be as deep as that, because I wanted that to look like I was on top of the dollar and not sort of set right back. You with me on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one I'm looking at now, and I'll give it to Ron in a minute. It's a second computerised image sent by, with corrections. However, another detail needed attention. The two dates needed to be repositioned. So that's these two dates here. They needed to be repositioned and get them more over that way and make them the same size. And so I sent them back another one. Above the third computerised image, was spot on. In particular, the space between the crest of the holy dollar and the altering of the levels of the dumps was of importance. The dumps needed to appear as though they were sitting on top of the dollar. So that's I'm for that one. Yeah, that was another thing. The two dumps, they were, one was further away from the edge, and I got them to get a little corrected. I've got the above sketch of a dump was sent with the original sketches of a holy dollar. But whereas the design of the dollar was followed quite closely, the dump was not afforded the same consideration. It may have been that they thought the lettering would look better if tidied up. Other considerations were of importance, such as the size of the fitted case. With the Queensland branch meeting the entire cost of the project, it was thought that the case should look appropriate for such an important medal. And the cost of postage was important. In collaboration with the post office, it was found that the overall thickness of the case was vital to the postage cost. And if it could be kept at below 12 millimetres in thickness, it would help considerably in the cost of mailing out the post product. So we got a piece of cardboard from the post office, and the box had to sort of fit
Slide
through that
through.
slot, otherwise you probably doubled your postage. And we wanted it to look good. And I thought it did look good considering the size of the medal. Bondjet International did a great job of producing the case and the double-sided insert descriptive cards. All 251 medals were posted in bulk to us, and the medals with the descriptive and card were all placed in a case ready for distribution. The medals came with an antique silver plating, which complemented the medal. With the cost of the overall production in mind, it was decided to produce one only with a satin gold finish. Do you remember that? or one fellow who was. This was to be auctioned off with the hope of recouping some of the money outlaid. This satin gold medal was accompanied with a certificate of authenticity, and no others would ever be produced. All members of the society were offered the medals at $15 each, and non-members $20 each. The entire project was a success. So there's a copy there of the original dump, and it was pretty close to the particular dump. And they must have thought that the letters were a bit wonky or something, and they just made nice shaped letters on the dump, which it didn't spoil it too much. And that's the letter of authenticity there. This is the box. It was all pretty technical. Pearn went up to the post office and asked all the questions about the postage, and that's how come we got the box at that size.
Yes, any thicker and it goes as parcel post, which is a lot more.
This is the sketch that we sent over for the box. We gave them what we wanted in size, and also the card, which was on both sides. There's only one card with all this writing about each side of the medal. And I don't know why, but they sent us 3 samples of the medals to see if we were satisfied before they did the whole lot. But they sent it out in a white box. I've got one of them over there. And we requested it. We requested the black one, but after telling them we wanted it in black with a silver crest on it, and it all turned out pretty good. So after, I think it was Burn suggested that they wanted to know a bit about the designer. So we got another piece of paper, and we printed them out, and I signed a lot of them, and it sort of made sure it just fit within the top of the box and wouldn't fall out. So you could have one of these plus one of these others there from the medal designer and signed. And the Queensland Branch Committee decided to produce a token of appreciation to present to George Snelgrove for his work in producing designs and artwork for the dual commemorative medal. And I suggested to him, because I knew the engraver pretty well and talked to him, he said, I can get a bit of sort of a plasticky type stuff. It was on a gold surface, black acrylic panel. It was sized to fit in with the casement, and that piece is over there at the top. That's about all I can tell you about it, I think. Is there any questions on it? There was certainly a lot of work gone into getting it exactly how we wanted it. You could relate to that, Rod.
From first contact with Hong Kong, and
Probably about 3 months all up. I'd
three
say,
months
yeah,
all
yeah.
up, was it?
But we were surprised to see the quality of the piece. And it's back a few years now, since it's 2013 or something. And none of them that I've seen have ever moved one item. You know, they're perfect and spot on. And of course we were worried about how much money we had to outlay and all that, but we came out fairly good in the end. And we're quite proud of it. But boy, you've got to keep your finger on it, and I might be able to show you a bit of that in my talk later on in the day. But anyway.
So how were they actually made? Were they
that.
That I couldn't find out. You could ask them questions and that. But in fact, I didn't even know what sort of metal they had. And it's certainly as good as a struck one.
Yeah, it certainly is.
But whether it was poured in and doesn't show any signs of being a casting or anything, and the plating on it was perfect, and the gold-plated one we got, it was nice too. So, but I never did know what the metal is underneath there.
It's probably a zinc alloy. They tend to use the zinc alloys.
Yeah, so we're pretty pleased with it. I'm still pleased with it. And, oh, incidentally, here comes the sales pitch. We've still got about 6 of them left at $20 each if anyone.
Made 250.
251, that was the gold one was the one. And of course then we got the 3 sample ones that say you could probably have that too. But no good at saying, oh there you are, there's a sample one there. The only thing it denotes it is the white box.
It hasn't got sample on the edge.
Well, I can't now, but I've got one.
Yeah, but does it have sample on the edge? No.
But I couldn't get over how good it was, and having Pearn there advising was pretty good because I didn't have a clue. I thought, gee, am I going to bring Hong Kong? Can they speak English? But we've got our problems, you might say, with China. But I must say this was a pretty good effort, I reckon.
Ian, you're going to have a question?
Yeah. Did you recoup a lot with the gold coin? With the gold?
I can't remember how much I brought, but it was pretty good.
Being a one-off,
yeah, one-off it was, yeah.
Undisclosed dinner?
Oh no, I can't say who it was. He's here today. But
Well, you can look it up. It was sold in one of our auctions.
I sold him one of your auctions.
One of the auctions. So if you look through the auctions, you can see who was bidding on it. Peter, did you buy it? You tended to buy all the.
I was a bit sort of in trouble at home because I said it was going to go into an auction, and my wife says I want it. I said even if you got it, it'd look terrible. That if you got it, the fella designing it and his wife gets it. And anyway, I said, how much do you want to bid? And she said how much. And thank goodness the fella that got it, the person that got it, went over the top of it. Sorry, darling. She would have liked that, the gold one.
On the question of what was it made of, I think the word tombac, which we use generally, really covers a multitude of senses. And tombac, I understand, is an alloy of copper and zinc, usually copper about 85% or so. Whereas I understand that when we say a metal is made of bronze, there's tin and sometimes arsenic added in to give the colour, the better colour. So most of the time we don't know what the company that ultimately strikes them is, and I think tombac is the general word that we use for these sort of things. But I really would defer to an expert in this area if there's anybody in the room.
Well, the first I come across tombac was the Canadian stuff they were holding out during the war, one of their bronze pieces. And I've known it as tombac.
Tombac's basically a kind of brass, because brass is copper and zinc.
And I never mentioned it in any write-ups, what the base metal was under the plating. And you're only sort of guessing, and with the Chinese it could have been made up of all sorts of things.
Yes. I also designed as George knows commissions metals, and I just use the word tombac because we honestly don't know the finer proportions of the alloys, but it's essentially copper and zinc, with a high proportion of copper, occasionally with a bit of tin added in.
Yeah, if I had to mention what I thought it was, I'd say tombac now, but I don't even know what proportions are in it, what else is added. A bit like medicine, I suppose.
I always ask them with the proclamation medals, what's the base metal, and they always say it's a zinc alloy, and I assume it depends on what the prices of everything is and what goes into the mix to keep it as cheap as possible.
Yeah, I've got various metals, and sometimes what they class as a white metal, sometimes it's awful stuff.
Yes.
And I've got another nice religious type metal from about 1860 something, and the box is knocked around and everything, but the metal itself is beautiful. The condition is shiny, and I think, well, how can you say white metal to anything? I suppose it's a general term.
I've got just another question, a lateral question. Somebody in the room may be able to answer. Has there ever been a situation where a specific holy dollar has been matched to its exact dump? Or is it, in fact, ever possible to do that?
I don't think so.
The dumps were worn flat. I don't think you can. They were ground
Well,
flat
they've
before
been good ones
striking.
on that.
So there's no trace of the design on most of the dumps. So you can't match it up.
And with some of the writings and that from numismatists from a long time ago, they would make comment on different things, and I think, well, how the hell do you know? And just lost me train of thought there.
Dumps, individual specific dumps.
Oh yeah, can you match them up?
Yeah.
And the closest I ever came, I got a dump one time, and you could clearly see King Charles IV. And you could tell by his nose and under his chin that's as close as I could ever get to say this dump came from a Charles IV holy dollar, but you can't say which one. And of course, there's only about 300 odd known.
That answers the question.
Because what you can't do is take a dump on a holy dollar and see if it fits. Because in making the dump, they show flatten.
When you hit the dump, it gets bigger, and when you hit the counter mark on the circle, it gets smaller.
Yeah, it shrinks, yeah.
The hole is small. That would have been a question you could have asked of Bruce Canning, because I think I remember that Bruce, he got some 8 real coins at one stage, and he started bashing holes in them.
Need them all from Barry.
That'd be the people who talk to you, because as you say, the hole, as you strike the New South
that's
Wales
right.
around
One
it,
comes in and the other one goes
it'll
out.
flatten it'll make the hole smaller, and the dump will never fit back in.
So I'd love to tell the story about Bruce made well, I'll go back a bit. I said to Bruce Canning one time, I said, you know, they've never ever found the actual press that they were struck on. You know, and everyone thinks, oh, you've got a press and big weight goes down and press it. And I said to Bruce one day, I said, hey, I reckon if we got a couple of bits of 1/2 inch steel with 4 holes in the end to put some bolts through, put your dies in, tighten up those things. I said, give them a damn good whack with a hammer, and it'll produce a holy dollar. And he said, yeah, you would. And so he'd set about and he made up the contraption which had a hinge on it, come down like this, and he'd have his, he'd knock a hole out of the dollar, put it in there, hold it together, and then he'd be able to give it a good whack at the top. And he said, you've got to hit it 3 times, he says, to get it nice and clear. He said, but somebody doing them, you don't need a big thing. He said, you could have something this big. It's pretty good.
I've got that one.
Yeah, that's right, that's the original one. Then he made another one later on. But anyway, when he was here, with that particular contraption that you've got, Barry, I don't know if it was in this room or not, but anyway, he's there, and I got up to narrate for him. He was a bit nervous about talking about it, and I'm saying, Bruce made this, but he put it in there like that. Now he'll get his big hammer, and he'll hit this 3 times. And he went whack, 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 and then he went whack again. And I said, oh, only 3 times in Queensland. I said, but down here you say it.
Okay, then, George, thanks very much. Here's your
name on it and all.
All right, thank you.
Which ones do you want to show first?
That one, but
Which
later
one?
on. After
This side first?
Okay, we got to just change.
Well, we can do that again.
John, can you present this again?
You want the sign to show the buildings? I think it's right. This way. And that's it. That'll go through the full document.
You make it the full page? You make it the full page? John will show you later.
Normally just press F5 to make it known. Here's the click.
Okay, yeah. Our next speaker is Barry Scott from Tasmania, and if you remember, at every time Barry sees a map of Australia, he always makes sure that Tasmania is right.
It's a devil of a job.
Today Barry is talking about the Tasmanian devil and the koala, a numismatic animal story. So I'll ask more questions about it later.
Good. Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody, fellow numismatic enthusiasts. This is an interesting story about animals, and I want to tell you a little story about two rats. Two rats were sitting together and they were talking about things, and one said to the other, "Have you had your COVID-19 injection yet?" And the other rat said, "No, not yet. There's too much research into humans. Humans are doing all the research and it's not my turn yet." So there you go. Animals have been in the world well before we have. And it's said that there's been so much extinction due to climate change, so much. And if you listen to David Attenborough and his TV series, you'll see his passion in trying to preserve animals and their habitat. And I've had a huge adventure with these two animals. 1980s were pretty busy years for me. I came to Brisbane as state manager of a property development company called Silverton, and that was taken over by T&G Insurance. And I met up with a couple of guys who were Tasmanians, and we decided to form a club because there were so many Tasmanians in Queensland. When it gets cold in Tasmania, they come to Queensland, and when it gets too hot in Queensland, they go back to Tasmania. So you get this changeover, and quite a lot love Queensland, they stay, like myself. So we got together, we decided to call it the Tasmanian Devils Club. And I was one of the guys who formed it because I was involved in a similar club in New South Wales. So that was in 1981. In 1984, after my wife had presented me with 3 daughters, I decided to get them the best education possible, and I chose Somerville House, which is in Brisbane Central, overlooking the old Expo 88 site. And my friend, who was a president of the Parents and Friends Association, he asked me if I knew much about money raising, and I said, look, I've been in the Lions Club and the JCs, and I love helping people. And he said, we've got a job for you. We want to form a foundation for the school. And this was the first girls' school in Australia. Most foundations and schools were boys' clubs, but I took up the challenge, promised the headmaster to get him $1 million, and he nearly fell off his chair. And we subsequently raised over 15 million. and funded 8 buildings in the school. So this was exciting. The school got so big they wanted extra land, and they asked me to help, and I negotiated with the owners of the Oasis in Sunnybank. The Oasis is a swimming pool complex with a zoo, and a lot of the Americans during the war used to go there for R&R. Anyway, for my sins they made me manager of the Oasis, and I had a whole zoo to myself. Can you imagine that? If you love animals, you've got a zoo. So I thought this was wonderful. And in the zoo there were a disease-free colony of koalas. And as I spoke to the vet, I learned about the problems of chlamydia psittaci, which has reproduction problems, and chlamydia trachoma, blindness. And I thought research into this animal situation could help humans. So we formed in 1986 the Australian Koala Foundation, raised a lot of money, funded research for people in the universities, and this went on. So that's a bit of background to the story, which I'll relate now, because with my passion of numismatics, I've joined the story of the animals with the coins. So if you could move on to the next one, please. I mentioned this is the Tassie Devils Club. Members came from Tasmania, now live in Brisbane, wish to share their interests and love of the state of birth with one another. We meet monthly, share our stories and raise funds for bushfire relief, animal research and sponsor Tasmanian devil animals in the Mole Creek Zoo and in a couple of other zoos. I was a founding member 81, elected president, and I've been the historian and patron for many years. I was appointed Deputy Commissioner for Tasmanian Expo 88, and many members supported this unique event and publicised our great state and its products, tourist sites and events. Excuse me, I'll just get some water. So that's how I collected badges and so on about it. Next, please. This charming creature has a friendly smile and a welcoming snarl to any visitors or other mammals that may choose to come too close. So there we are, look at his teeth. So this is a Tasmanian devil. Next one, thanks. The Tassie Devils club badges, gold Tasmanian devil and over Tasmania. You can see that's our club featuring the Tasmanian devil. Next one, thanks. This is a badge I found, the Tasmanian Devil's badge, to indicate devils can be 10 kilometres from where you intend to be. They're very elusive, mostly come out at night, but people have seen them, and they usually go for roadkill and fight each other to have any of the food. This is another coloured badge, a descriptive badge of a black devil looking for its next meal. Tassie devil is the size of a small dog. It's become the largest carnivorous marsupial in the world, following the extinction of the thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger, in 1936, characterised by its stocky and muscular build, black fur, pungent odour, very loud and disturbing screech, keen sense of smell and ferocity when feeding. So you've got to keep away from them at the time. So this was a £10 coin, and you can see the Tas devil in the right-hand side there. The devil facial tumour disease has drastically reduced the population and now threatens the survival of the species. To assist their survival, life raft communities have been set up on the mainland in New South Wales, and disease-free colonies are now emerging. So a lot of research has been done by the Tasmanian University and a number of others, just to keep the species alive and keep it away from other animals which have got the disease. So this unique marsupial, the devil, became extinct in the mainland Australia about 3,000 years ago due to climate change, human population increase and dingo attacks. Survivors crossed the then land bridge to Tasmania and lived in protected forested areas in the south and west of the state. In 1941, the devils became officially protected. So this was a silver-proof dollar featuring the Tasmanian devils. So down used to produce that. Still big teeth, isn't it? The devil's postage stamp $1.85, used Australia's international postage service. So again, you see the devil there with the white part in his fur. Now, you can't mention the Tasmanian devil without mentioning the Tasmanian tiger. And here's a set of 20 postage stamps featuring an early set, valued at $1 and 2p. But you might, a lot of you might remember seeing those stamps for the Tasmanian tiger. Next one, thanks. The now extinct Tasmanian tiger with its distinctive tiger stripes on its back. This was hunted to extinction. Very sad, because they were killing sheep in Tasmania, and the farmers got their guns and started shooting them, and eventually there were 1 or 2 left in the zoos, and that was the result of them eventually going to extinction. The Tasmanian government were aware of this, and after lots of debate in Parliament, they brought out an act to save it. The act was finally passed. A week later, the last Tasmanian tiger died. Next one, thanks. Now, Phil Benjamin, great uncle, was one of the favourite guys in the zoos. He loved going to the zoos in Tasmania, and the last one must have been named after his uncle, Benjamin. And I just said you about the legislation. So Benjamin was the last of his species. And this particular coin on the right here, if you move it, it changes about 4 different types. It's rather interesting. And if you look over my exhibition over there, you'll see both sides of this particular coin, and it's rather interesting to do it. So that was the last Tasmanian tiger. It's a sad story, isn't it? See a whole species disappear. So that's the story of the Tasmanian devil and the Tasmanian tiger. Let's move on to the koala. In 1980, I had the neat experience of managing a zoo called the Oasis. Zoo had a disease-free colony of koalas. That's why I formed the Australian Koala Foundation. Through bushfires, dog attacks, droughts and chlamydia problems affecting their reproduction and eyes. Koala numbers have dropped alarmingly from many millions to under 300,000 members. We're now promoting the Koala Protection Act to save our beloved icon. Many koala medals, coins and badges show the love and interest of Australians for our beloved marsupial. And the joy of forming this Australian Koala Foundation was a lovely story, I suppose, because I went around Australia forming branches in all the states. And I was lucky to get the Knights of the Realm around me, Sir Robert Norman and Sir Charles Court and quite a lot of other people who came aboard, and that gave us a lot of strength. And we started raising money for the research, and we funded many fellows in the different universities, but the research really didn't help because the numbers were dropping, and it was koala habitat that was diminishing. So we decided to put more energy in saving the habitat of the koala. So let's move on to the next one, thank you. Cute and cuddly koalas, an Australian icon that attracts tourists from around the world. We did research with with a professor in Canberra, and he worked out at $1.3 billion before COVID. We came to our economy from overseas visitors just to see our unique wildlife. So it's rather interesting to see that huge amount. Okay, next one. This is a print which I've got at the back of there, was specially prepared for a future stamp issue, showing a koala with a baby on the back. The baby koala, when it's first born, it's like the size of a jelly bean. And it finds its way into the pouch of the koala, attaches it to 1 or 2 teats, and after about 6 months, or 3 months, it emerges and gets onto the back of the koala. It stays there for a year, and then the mother, who's usually pregnant again, releases the baby to be independent, and the koala goes on its way. And the mother usually has 4 years of producing baby koalas. Very rare to have twins, but sometimes it happens. It's hard not to love the koala and help it survive in its reducing habitat. As manager of the Oasis Zoo in Sunnybank, I had many opportunities to care for and protect them and learn their problems and needs. This is a page from my school onto St Church Grammar School, and they had a book of all of different people who've done things, and they called me an environmentalist. And there's a koala cuddling me, and this is the badge that we produced, which has been reproduced millions of times. So somehow the school found out what I was doing, and they put that story together. So these are some of our foundation badges. Stick pens were designed by the Australian Koala Foundation. Our theme has been no tree, no me. And because I've got some stick pens, happen to have a dozen up there, I'd like to give those away to the first 12 people who might want one. So I've got them over there for you. Okay, next one, thank you. Here's the Australian icon depicted, the little square coin, which tourists seem to lap up, and we sell those to the overseas people, but a typical Australian badge celebrating our country. Now this is interesting. The fires happened early this year and last year, and it was estimated that 3 billion animals, insects and so on were killed in Australia during the fires. It was quite amazing. And in Melbourne, somebody depicted the koala on a wall in Melbourne with the fire hose. Isn't that interesting? So these artists love to draw the koala. Maybe this koala wanted to help save the many mates during the huge bushfires throughout Australia, where thousands died. I went down to Taree to help a lot of victims during the floods and the fires that they had there, and I witnessed the koalas being killed, and it was so sad. Some of them were burnt on their paws. We had to put medications on them. And I went back, and there was a sign near Wallaby Point, just east of Taree, and it had "Koalas cross here," and behind it was all the burnt bush. So I said to somebody, I showed it to them, and he said, "No wonder the koalas are cross. Look what they've done to the bush." So that's the story there. Next one. Koala coins produced for tourists to remind them how koalas lived in our trees. And there's another one with a koala and the baby on the back. And Australia. So being promoted like this, it makes people around the world they very much want to come and visit our shores. Again, the koala is on the back. We used to promote the 1988 World Junior Figure Skating in Brisbane during Expo 88. There's a design, but it's got a kangaroo as well. So it's the kangaroo, emu and koala are the three icons of Australia, which is used to celebrate our country. Next one, thanks. Here we have three koalas on the souvenir dollar. Very popular during Expo 88 and other Queensland events. Again, you know, it's quite interesting to see how it's designed, and it shows exactly what Australia's like. On the reverse is a land of contrast, and that's exactly what it is. I made sure Tasmania was there. So, who would have thought that koalas been promoted at local events? Here's the MRA Motor Rocket Fun run in 1988. I've never seen a koala riding a motorbike, but there you go. Next one. These are some coins produced by the Isle of Man. And here we have the koala, Tasmanian devil, and the cockatoo, the kangaroo, and I can't quite see this, sheep, I think, or deer. Anyway, so the koala and the devil appeared in that little group from the Isle of Man. Another koala, and this one's from Brisbane. The koala is the fauna symbol of Queensland. Not many people realise that. The Queensland government wanted to put a road through Daisy Hill down to the Gold Coast, and we thought it was wrong because it was going right through a koala habitat. We brought in scientists from different states. We had public meetings, and we said this is a wrong thing to do through this habitat because it'll ruin the habitat for the trees that they're eating. 4 members of the Queensland government were thrown out, and the government fell. We didn't realise we had that power. So it's quite amazing what you can do when you push it. Next one, thanks. Have you ever seen a koala playing soccer? The Northern Rivers Amateur Soccer Federation shows a soccer-loving koala. Look at that. Okay, stamps. This was a koala ambassador type stamp with the Chinese. Australia Chinese promoted the koala and the panda. So there's a series of stamps done showing Blinky Bill, the second on the right, Snugglepot and Cuddle Pie, and a few other ones there, and of course the koala amongst the gum trees.
And others that don't matter, you mean?
What's that?
Others that don't matter.
Again, international recognition for the koala is shown on more stamps. You can see that 3 of them have got koalas and the baby on the back. But a lot of you probably have seen these. In 1989, the koala platinum coin was produced. And 1 ounce koala proof coin is shown there, again with the koala and the baby on the back, on the limb of the tree. So this was quite an important platinum coin, worth a fair bit. So there we go there. Now that's the brochure which they produced for the platinum coin. And again the koala and the baby is shown there. Now here's a unique coin showing not only the koala but the kangaroo and emu. It was interesting to get a coin with the 3 icons on it. There's a merino up there on the top and the Tasmanian tiger. So we've got everything in the little group of coins there. That's a rather unusual one. Here is a gilded coin, 2008 koala series. And that was being produced, and it's unusual to see. Well, it's more and more now they've got a gilded part of a coin being shown. So I quite imagine quite a few would have had that coin. This dollar coin features a koala in the fork of a tree eating gum leaves in natural colour. Dollar coin, it's a rather nice one, isn't it? Without the baby. Land series. So that's another one. We designed badges with the code "No Tree, No Me." A little bit indistinct, apologise for that, but they are badges which I've got available. And that tells a story, and we've been promoting that "No Tree, No Me." Next one, thanks. We formed a koala club with our own badge with a smiling koala. And that's something a little bit different, but again, it's good to promote what we intend to do, and that's another aspect of it. We have a number of sponsors who have come aboard to help, and they've given us money, and because of my connection with Sir James Foote, we got Westpac as our sponsor. And Westpac produced this little badge, again with the mother and the baby, and the Australian Koala Foundation. So it's lovely when you get sponsors. We've had many hundreds of different sponsors producing all sorts of things. And in the bushfire period, people all around the world have been giving us money. We've got over millions in the bank. It's quite amazing. I never thought this would evolve, but that puts a responsibility on us to do all we can. And we have got this Koala Act, and we've even got a red shirt showing a determined koala holding his hand up. He wants the act to go through, and you'll notice that the koala has 2 thumbs and 3 fingers. So it's rather unusual. A lot of people think that it's got the 4 fingers like we have. It's got 2 thumbs and 3 fingers, which helps it grip the tree as it climbs up. So there is the new thing we're doing. In the early days, we put a koala leaf with a badge on it, and we sold those for $1 each. We even had a wishing well in a building in Brisbane, and my job was to go and collect all the coins, put them into bags, and take them to the Commonwealth Bank to deposit them. Well, the coins were still wet, and it was pretty heavy, and I was holding it like this, and the water was dripping down, and it wetted my whole pants. And my mate came along, he said, "What the heck have you been doing?" And that was just because of collecting these coins on the wishing well. So, there you go. But that was the way we did it. Now, how many of you seen this $200 gold coin? It came out, created by the Australian Mint, with a koala on the fault of the gum tree. We negotiated with the Mint, and we were able to get a commission for every one that was sold, which helped our income. And let's just turn over to the next one, thanks. In 1983, we negotiated to have a commission given us for the sale of each gold and koala coin. We loved having the Australian Mint as a sponsor. So if you don't ask, you don't receive. It's amazing what happens when you try. Australian Women Bowling Council, who would have thought of them coming aboard and getting a koala on their coin? But the Women's Bowling Council used a koala to promote their event. And there you see a koala, what's around his neck? Maybe it's a woman's shoe, I don't know. Anyway, that's the Bowling Council. And then on the reverse of the coin, look, the end is in sight. Farewell to the koala. It's rather poetic, isn't it? Now, this has been a labour of love. I've done it in my spare time, helping the Tasmanian devil and the koala. There is a naturalist who is called Vincent Savetti, a great naturalist, and he ended up being chairman of the Wildlife Protection Association. The Wildlife Protection Association has the Governor-General as its sponsor, and I was honoured on the 100th year, and if you wouldn't mind showing that badge, thank you,
We
Clive.
go through across.
I was honoured to in their 100th year to be given this coin, which is the Savetti Conservation Medal. And uniquely, it's got a koala on one side and an echidna on the other. And Maria Bashir, Governor of New South Wales, invited me down, and they had a special dinner in my honour, and they gave me $2,500 as compensation for the voluntary work that I'd done. So you don't know what's going to happen when you start doing volunteer work and other things like that. So as we gradually get this, you'll see the koala. This is a brass piece of coin. It's 130mm die. And you've heard mention of Bernie Begley. I've got here a copy of a magazine, and our patron John in 2009 was awarded a AO medal, a great honour by the government for all his activities. And on the same page, Bernie Begley again wrote an article about the Savetti Conservation Medal. And it's quite an honour to have that recognised, and I'm very grateful for having received that. So this is a convex part of the coin. Is it able to be any clearer than that, Rod? Probably now, that's getting a little bit clearer. But you can see again a koala on the branch of a tree. And it's quite a unique medal. They're only produced once every few years. And to have it awarded to me on their 100th year was quite a special celebration. And if you turn it over, you'll see a lovely kitten and the Wildlife Preservation Society. So that was one of their symbols that they had. And if you want to support the Wildlife Preservation Society, they do some wonderful work all around the world. So that's that. And then, unexpectedly, last year, I got a letter from the Governor-General who awarded me an OAM. And there's an OAM for services to animal conservation and other things. So who knows what happens when you start doing work in the community and with a passion of helping animals. Our motto of the Koala Foundation is caring and sharing. And that's what everybody who comes aboard likes to do, and we've got a very dedicated group of staff and people and sponsors who help us, and it's just a thrill to be part of that and to share with you the story where it's turned into medals, another passion of mine, so I'm combining a number of passions together. So that's the story there. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll look at the display and take some of the handouts we've got, and when you have a few moments, look at www.savethekoala.com. You'll find a huge amount of information there which we share, and if you want to get your children or grandchildren to have a koala sponsored, all you've got to do is ask. We've even got a shop there, so there's a lot of information there. Thanks, John.
Barry, are you still buying more land and getting more trees? Is that the plan?
We've been offered land. We've got 100 acres up near Noosa, Kenilworth, and there we've got koala trees being planted all the time. It's next to a national park, so it's pretty well protected. Mm-hmm. And then in Oakey, we've got 400 acres being given to us on the shores of the lake. People to look after it. So we've had research people go in there and check their land and see if it's suitable for other purposes. And we get visitors from overseas who come, we provide tents and food for them, and we talk about animal conservation. So we're doing a fair bit to help people understand the importance of animals in our life and protecting habitat.
Gary, excuse me.
Yes.
Wombats, you didn't include wombats?
Well, wombats and koalas are pretty well related, going way back in time. And at the zoo in Tasmania, near Sheffield, Trowana Zoo, there are lovely koala, wombats there, and I actually cuddled one, and he clung to me for over 2 hours. And I was holding this heavy wombat. It was wonderfully feeling. And there are a number of wombats. Again, they have young through a backward pouch, and they are preserved in a number of zoos and out in the wild. People are dedicated to looking after them. So again, it's a wonderful species. I've seen them in the wild.
But they're in trouble with mange.
That's right, yes, yes. There's so many stories about animals in trouble. Very sure. Any other?
Yeah, Barry, I live in inner Brisbane, and we have a colony of wild breeding koalas in a bird sanctuary 5 kilometres from the GPO in the centre of Brisbane.
Right.
It is just amazing, and I've just published a book on the area with the koalas featured on the front. And following that, as you and all our colleagues know, one of the biggest threats, of course, are dogs.
Yes.
So what we've just managed to do is get the council to put up signs everywhere reinforcing the importance of dogs on leashes for people walking in that area.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I understand that the koalas come up corridors where there are creeks.
Yep.
And in inner Brisbane there are these creeks, of
Yes.
course, with koala passages.
We have used our influence to go to local councils up and down the east coast of Australia and preserve, when developers want to use a whole lot of land, we insist on corridors of land linking different forests. One of the dangers, you mentioned dogs, we persuade people through the RSPCA to preserve dogs, but in the wild it's not only that dogs, it's goannas and owls and eagles sometimes fly down and take the baby off the back of the koala. So, and often the koala it has a range of about 10 hectares, where during mating time it visits a number of females in different areas, and it has different types of leaves that it eats during different times of the year. And the Blue Mountains, actually, during the summer, you see the blue haze, that's cyanide type gas coming off the leaves of the gum trees. And the koala always smells the leaf before it eats it. And they have different types of leaves during different times of the year. So it's quite fascinating when you learn the story of these things. Yeah.
Good. I do have a love for animals, particularly elephants, horses and dogs.
Right.
Because they're hard workers and loyal.
Yeah.
And the two swimming pools out in Galway, one was the Oasis, was the other one the Arcadia?
Yes, that was
I used to go out
sold.
there when I was about 20 years old.
Right, right.
And they had a kiosk there,
Yep.
about from here to that room over there long. And outside where the customers were, not inside where they served you, they had 4 or maybe 5 white cockatoos there.
Yes, yes.
On a stand. You know, I rested at the bar there, and next thing, something tapped my arm, and it was a white cockatoo on his perch.
Right.
And they had a safety chain so he didn't fly away. And he grabbed hold of my shirt and said, "Hello, cock."
One of those cockatoos in our zoo thought it was a cat and it meows. So he walked past the cage and there's a cockatoo meowing.
Anyway, this fella, he grabbed my shirt and he came over and he put his head right down in that pocket.
Yes.
I suppose people would buy chocolate bars and he was looking for that. And anyway, so he's looking at me and I was sort of patting him. The next thing he lifted up his arm, and I run my hand underneath, and the other arm went up, and so I'm there massaging this white cockatoo.
Oh.
And I looked at the bloke serving, he says, you can't have him, mate.
How many of you here have got pets? Animals, dogs, birds, cats? I mean, animals, you give love to them and they come back 100-fold, doesn't it? And that's so magic. And it's an experience that everybody should have. And I made sure my children actually see koalas in the wild, because a lot of you probably have never seen them in the wild. John has, but a few never have, and you've got to go to special places where they own Capalaba. There's a few there, but it's rather rare. So it's nice to be able to have them still, and our main goal is to make sure the species is preserved and better habitat is available for them.
It may not be generally known as how to find a tree with a koala in it.
Yes.
You go and look for where the Japanese tourists are all underneath pointing upwards.
We have funded research to find out how many koalas, and the way we do it is that there are either scratch marks on the base of the tree or koala poo. And koala poo droppings are down there, and we've researched over nearly 500,000 trees. And we've got maps of all the areas. If you look at our website, you'll see maps of different areas. And where there are places in Australia where members of parliament are responsible, you may not know that the koala is owned by the government. People can't own an animal, the government is responsible. But unfortunately, the government only thinks short term when they want to be re-elected. So we're pressuring the government people to either support it or not, and we call it ACT or AXE. And we're trying to tell which parliamentarians need to be AXE or support the ACT. So we're using a bit of pressure there. Another interesting story is that during the early years, the Australian government gave 2 koalas to the San Diego Zoo as a goodwill gesture to try to improve trade. The Americans were very cunning, and they made sure the koalas produced a baby. They loaned that baby to other zoos for $1 million a year. And this happened a number of times. These koalas are being loaned to zoos and they're getting millions of dollars in. So we went to America, we hammered our fist on the table, and we said, this is wrong. Money that you get should come back to the country of origin. And eventually, after a few years, they saw our way, and we attracted money from zoos. Then we said, what about the panda in China? What about the elephant in Africa? And gradually, zoos have come along and supported the country of origin animals. So it's rather nice to see this evolve.
How many humans do it?
Just one final question, and that'll be for me. With the koala and your foundation, if anyone wanted to use the koala on a medal or anything that produced, do they have to get approval from you?
No. The ones that I showed here were produced by other people. Okay. We have copyrights to the maps that we've produced, and they're available, but we tried, people used the maps, they took away our logo and said it was theirs, so we had to stop that, but we license it out to different people.
But as far as the koala itself, you don't have copyright over the koala?
No.
Or anything like that?
We have copyright over our website, www.savethekoala.com, and then a few others too. So you just got to look at the website and see the range of ones we have.
So like what you were saying about when the Royal Australian Mint produced the $200 coin with the koala on it, you sort of knocked on their door and said,
about supporting us.
You need to support us because we are looking after an Australian icon.
Anybody that uses the koala to promote, we ring them up and say, how about giving us a donation because you're using the koala for your own purposes. So we use our own initiative there.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. That's very kind of you.
She wants to take a photo.
Oh, right. Thank you very much. Thanks, John.